Returning home that morning after my betrayal felt like stepping into a distorted nightmare. The exhaustion I felt wasn't just from my reckless choices but from the crushing realization that my life had changed irreversibly. The apartment Michael and I had once shared, filled with laughter and warmth, now felt foreign and cold. It seemed more like a stranger's space than a place where we had built memories. His presence lingered in my mind, but the physical reminders of him were gone. His clothes neatly hung in the closet, the familiar scent, his toiletries in the bathroom, and photographs that once captured our happiest moments. All of it had vanished. I stood frozen in the doorway, clutching my bag as though it were my only connection to reality. I was desperately trying to hold on. Writing this account feels like confessing a deep and unforgivable sin, and perhaps it is. I am painfully aware that readers would judge my actions harshly, but I don't seek sympathy. I know I don't deserve it. The weight of shame is heavy on my shoulders, knowing that I destroyed the life Michael and I had built together, and I accept full responsibility for what I did. My counselor, Dr. Sarah, suggested that I write down my feelings as a way to face my choices rather than hide from them. So here I am, laying bare my soul in an attempt to understand where everything began to fall apart. Michael and I had shared 3 wonderful years together, years filled with love and companionship. We were only days away from our wedding. The venue was set, the floral arrangements were confirmed, and the guest list had been carefully curated. Everything was moving at a dizzying pace, and somewhere along the way, I lost sight of myself. I'm not sure if it was the mounting pressure or a fear of commitment that led me to make the most terrible mistake of my life. During what should have been the most joyous time of our lives, I betrayed him. Michael was unlike anyone I had ever known. He was a calming, stabilizing force in my chaotic world, always anchoring me when I felt lost. I can still vividly recall our first meeting during a St. Patrick's Day celebration. We were both surrounded by friends at a crowded pub when he caught my attention. He stood out, the only one not wearing green. With a playful grin, he walked up to me, pulled out a small bag of candy, and jokingly said, "Here's your pot of gold, leprechaun." His humor made me laugh, and that laughter marked the beginning of our inseparable bond. Michael's thoughtfulness and dependability made me feel prioritized in a way I had never experienced. For the first time, I felt truly seen and accepted, flaws and all. But maybe, deep down, I never truly believed I was worthy of such love, and that doubt may have been the root of my downfall. As our wedding day approached, I became more and more overwhelmed by the constant planning, family dynamics, and the pressure to make everything perfect. In the chaos, I lost sight of what truly mattered, my relationship with Michael. With just days left until the wedding, instead of feeling the excitement I should have, a sense of being trapped consumed me, an overwhelming feeling I couldn't escape. Meanwhile, Michael remained calm and unshaken. The wedding stress didn't seem to affect him at all. He exhibited endless patience as I became increasingly unhinged over minor details like table settings. His only 2 requests were simple: no lavish bachelor or bachelorette parties, and he wanted to wear a classic tuxedo. Everything else was open to negotiation. Yet even those basic desires felt like burdens I couldn't bear. At that moment, rather than confiding in Michael about my growing anxiety, I chose to keep everything bottled up. I convinced myself I needed one last night of freedom before committing to marriage, a misguided attempt to release the pressure building inside me. That's when I made the impulsive decision to throw a bachelorette party, ignoring Michael's wishes. It was a selfish and reckless choice, but in that moment, it felt like my only escape from the weight of the expectations. The night began innocently, with my friends and me heading to a bar, sharing drinks and reminiscing about old times. But as the night progressed and the alcohol flowed freely, the atmosphere shifted, and things quickly spiraled out of control. After several rounds of shots, we ended up at a friend's apartment, where a stripper had been arranged. What was supposed to be harmless fun transformed into a haze of poor decisions. I remember flirting with the stripper, laughing at his jokes, and feeling an excitement I hadn't felt in ages. Somehow, I ended up in his bed. The details of that night faded into a surreal blur, as though I were an observer in someone else's life. The harsh reality hit me the next morning like a ton of bricks, accompanied by a throbbing headache and overwhelming dread. In my groggy state, I instinctively reached out, expecting to find Michael beside me, but my heart sank when I realized I was alone with the stripper. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to gather my clothes, desperate to escape the nightmare I created. I tried to convince myself it was all a bad dream, that silence could somehow undo my choices, but deep down, I knew I had crossed an unforgivable line. The weight of guilt consumed me, making the thought of facing Michael unbearable. As I approached our home, a sense of dread filled me long before I even stepped inside. The atmosphere was thick with tension. When I entered, I was confronted by a scene that shattered me. Michael's belongings were gone. His clothes, his books, our cherished photographs. Everything was missing. My heart raced as I searched each room, praying this was all some cruel misunderstanding. But every empty space only confirmed the painful truth. Michael had left. On the kitchen counter lay a note with 2 devastating words. Hope it was worth it. I stared at the note, tears streaming down my face, feeling as though I had been struck physically. The grief left me breathless and reeling, unable to process the reality of what I had done. I couldn't bring myself to accept that Michael was truly gone. I held on to hope that there might be a chance to apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But it was evident that Michael had made his decision to end things. I understood why he did it. My calls went unanswered, and my messages never reached him. He had blocked me on every platform, wiping away every trace of our connection as if our relationship had never existed. I collapsed to the floor, clutching the note he had left me, as waves of sobs consumed me. I had destroyed the most beautiful part of my life, and there was no undoing it. In the days that followed, I withdrew from the world, shutting myself off completely. I stopped eating and barely slept, retreating into a dark shell of despair. Friends tried to reach out, but I couldn't bring myself to face them. The shame was suffocating. How could I explain what I had done to Michael, the man who had loved me unconditionally? Just days before, we had been making plans for our future, and now all I felt was regret. The events of that night replayed over and over in my mind, each repetition bringing a fresh surge of longing to undo the past. But deep down, I knew it was impossible. The damage was done, and it couldn't be fixed. As the weeks turned into months, I attempted to piece my life back together. Each day was filled with the same overwhelming guilt and sense of loss. The apartment, half empty and devoid of the life we had built together, was a constant reminder of my actions. There was no escape, no matter how hard I tried. I reached out to Michael's best friend, Chris, hoping he could provide any information about where Michael might be, maybe even offer a glimmer of hope. But Chris's response was blunt and final. Michael doesn't want contact. Stay away. In that moment, the finality of it all hit me. Michael had moved on. He had severed the ties between us beyond repair. Eventually, I began attending therapy with Dr. Sarah. She encouraged me to write about my experiences, believing that documenting my feelings would help me process my emotions and understand the reason behind my actions. At first, I resisted, knowing it would be painful to confront the truth. However, Dr. Sarah gradually helped me realize that my actions weren't just about one night of infidelity. They were part of a deeper, recurring pattern in my life.